Hey everybody, welcome back to the Laps Comic Fan. I'm Steve, and today we're talking X-Men #1 from 1963. So I'd like to welcome all the new subscribers. Really appreciate it. And if you're watching and you're not subscribed, if you click that subscribe button, if you like the content, that would help out a lot. And for everybody else, put your thumbs in the upright position. All right, guys. Sorry this took forever. So much stuff has gone on. I had a bunch of hospital stuff, and then I cut my thumb up, and let's just get into this. Look at this awesome cover. It just jumps out at you, and it's classic. I love the top left corner. To Cyclops' weird neck, and the fact that they blindfold Jean really helps the team. So let's get to the elephant in the comic debate room. Lee and Jack Kirby. I'm not going to go into who created what or who did more, but let's talk about the writing style and the art. There's two sides of the fence with these two. You either love it or hate it. Stan's early writing was the basis for classic Marvel comics. It's hokey as hell and wordy. But man, this comic took forever to read for me. I'm not a huge fan of his dialogue, but I'm a huge fan of the world building. Jack Kirby, on the other hand, I love his art. More so his later art. Some of the things you're going to see in this comic are weird, but it's the first. It had to be exciting to be creating these characters and worlds. But let's get into the comic. We are introduced to a man in a wheelchair sitting alone in a school. Using his thoughts, he calls out to a group called the X-Men. This is no ordinary man, and this is no ordinary school. This is Professor X, the leader of the group called the X-Men. Cyclops, Angel, Iceman, and the Beast all come to attention in front of their leader. Using their extraordinary gifts, they adjust the professor's chair and fix his blanket. Iceman fools around with Beast before their class starts. Professor X settles the students and says Beast will be first to start his lesson. He also congratulates them for receiving his directions telepathically so well. Cyclops readies the machine for Beast's training. Professor X gives him a number of commands to execute, and Beast completes them all. He will get his grade tomorrow. Next up is Angel. Once again, the commands are given telepathically, and Professor X tells Angel that he dare not make a mistake. Angel is cocky and says mistakes are for Homo sapiens. As he completes the course, the professor warns him about his overconfidence. Angel flies through the course with ease, but gets caught up by a sudden sound concussion, throwing him out of whack. He must not hit the ground. After he steadies himself, the professor again admonishes him over his overconfidence, but congratulates him on overcoming the obstacle in front of him. It may save his life one day. Iceman wants to know when the professor is going to stop going easy on him just because he's the youngest in the group. Some things cannot be rushed, my boy. You may have 5 minutes of free time to play around. Iceman grabs some stuff to turn himself into a snowman to make the group laugh. But he forgets that the professor can read his mind, so he has Beast stand at the ready. Iceman turns around revealing his snowman gimmick, but coming at him with supreme velocity is a cannonball thrown by the physically strongest member of the X-Men. With quick thinking, Iceman forms a curved piece of ice that sends the cannonball directly back at his classmate. The professor is amazed at the reflexes of the 16-year-old Iceman. Beast catches the ball, but is silenced by the stern professor. It's now Cyclops' turn. The professor tells Cyclops to pretend Iceman and Beast are his enemy and uses optic beams on them to put them out of action without hurting them. Cyclops gets Beast first. Iceman, seeing this, encases himself in a block of ice, thinking this may slow Cyclops' beams down. After getting thrashed by Cyclops, the four students all go at each other, with the professor watching on. With a sharp telepathic command, he has them stop and return to their places. He congratulates them on their progress and their ability to hear him telepathically. He also says that they may be interested to know that a taxi is arriving this very moment with a new pupil, a most attractive young lady. So we're introduced to Professor X first, starting off, and he seems like a really weird guy, because the stuff that he says in this comic, I don't know. It's probably the writing. It's definitely a sign of the time from 1963. So this was written by Stan Lee, and the art was by Jack Kirby, and they are responsible for so much of Marvel. I'm not going to get into who was responsible for what, whether it was Lee or Kirby. You guys can look that up on your own and come to your own conclusion. But this is no ordinary professor. He runs the Xavier Institute, which we'll get to know later, but basically it's just a school right now. And he starts calling out to this group called the X-Men. And who are the X-Men? Well, they're Cyclops, Angel, Iceman, and Beast. So he congratulates these students for hearing him telepathically. So that's what we find out is Xavier's ability. He can use telepathy, and he can hear people's thoughts and communicate with people. And maybe later we might find out that he can implant thoughts into your head. Sounds very awesome. He has his students run these little training programs, and he's communicating with them telepathically and giving them instructions. And they have to complete these courses. We learn a little bit more about the personalities of these students. Beast is kind of smart, and he's very strong, and he's acrobatic. Angel has wings, and he is a lot overconfident. He's kind of a cocky character. And Iceman, he's very young, and he's a little bit rebellious and wants to know why everybody treats him like a little kid. And he could possibly be one of the most powerful of them all. And then there's Cyclops, who, my God, Cyclops in the older comics he's just a stick in the mud, man. He's just a stick in the mud. So, there's this part during Iceman's training where, since he was the youngest one, he kind of complained to the professor, when are you going to stop taking it easy on me just because I'm young? And the professor's like, hey, in time, you'll get it in time. So he's like, you can have 5 minutes to just mess around. And Iceman's going to try to make the rest of the group laugh, but he doesn't remember that the professor can hear his thoughts. So he has Beast get a cannonball to throw at a 16-year-old kid. And then he throws it at him. Iceman's quick thinking. He creates this ice, thing that shoots the ball back. The ball slides in, it comes back at him. Beast catches the ball. He does it near the professor, and Cyclops just goes off. He's like, that was so close to the professor. You could have hurt him. It's like, dude, he's the one that told me to throw it, stupid. And there's a lot of that in this. You either really, really like these old comics or you don't. So the professor himself, the way it's written, and I'll get in more to the story and what I think about the story, but the way that the dialogue is written is very odd. It was just very odd back then. And like I said, I'm not as familiar with Marvel as I am with DC, but the professor gives them instruction, but then he's very stern. He's very stern with them. When Angel's doing his routine, he's telling him, you dare not make a mistake on this. But I understand why he's saying that, because the things that he's doing or the situations that they could be in, they could save his life, knowing how to do the things that Professor X is teaching him how to do. So after all of their training and what he had in store for them, he settles them down. They're all wrestling together. And he even says sometimes boys roughhousing is good for them. All right, now stop it. And he tells them, hey, you might be interested that there's a taxi coming with a new student. And she's the most attractive young lady. So over the next few pages, we get introduced to this new student. The guys are spying on her getting out of the taxi, and they're all fawning over her except for Iceman. And it's so weird, guys. It's so weird. The guys are fawning over her because she's beautiful and she's got great gams. They also wonder what powers she has. So the new student is greeted by Xavier. Her name is Jean. And Professor X tells her, hey, I'm glad you got my message. She's a little bit weirded out. She wants to know what kind of school this is because she couldn't tell her family, she couldn't tell anyone anything, and she had to be very secretive about coming here. And Professor X tells her, look, I know this may seem weird, but I know you have some extraordinary abilities. And how do I know this? Is because I can read minds. I have abilities too. In fact, the other 4 students here at the school, they all have abilities too. We're not like normal humans. We're called mutants. You have extra power, and that's why I named the group the X-Men. The X is for extra power. So the boys are introduced and they're wearing their best clothes, and Hank's fixing up his tie and they're all looking stupid as hell. They're all just drooling over her. It's kind of sad. It's just weird the way it's written. And they all try their lines on her except for Iceman. He just doesn't care. He's just like, wow, if I was like you guys, I'd never want to be here. I don't want to live if I have to talk like you guys. Cyclops is bringing a chair over to her, and it's funny because there's two things that happen here that I thought were kind of funny. Hank says something like, oh, look at you bringing her a chair. And Cyclops like, I'd bring her every piece of furniture in here if she asked me to. My God, I haven't seen vagina in forever. But Jean says, hey, you don't have to worry about that, Slim. So that's the first time she calls him Slim. And then all of a sudden, the chair comes out of his hands, goes past all the guys, and gets right in front of Jean. And they're all like, I don't know what happened, Professor. How did this happen? I mean, I know we're all superpowered beings, and the chair just flew like a ghost. I can't connect the dots together. What happened? Xavier tells Jean to demonstrate more of her powers. She opens up this book and moves it all around. So she has telekinesis, and she explains to them that she's always had to hide this power. And all her life, it's just been, I always have had to hide this from everybody, and this will be awesome to be here where I can learn to use it better, but not have to do it in secrecy, be able to do it out in the open. So Xavier tells a little bit more about himself, that he was in an accident when he was a child. That's why he's in the wheelchair. And we learn that he thinks he may be the first mutant ever. When he learned about his powers, he saw that regular people feared him and that the human race just wasn't ready to accept mutants. So that's why he formed the school. So young mutants and other mutants alike could learn to use and control their powers. After that, the boys welcome Jean to the group. Beast completely oversteps his boundaries and tickles her chin and kisses her. She just uses her telekinesis and just poof, throws him off onto a couch. Jean kind of says, I hope I wasn't too rough on the guys. Xavier says, no, we don't use kid gloves here. He doesn't do that because he wants to prepare them for the mission that he has them on, and that is to save the world. From what, you ask? He says, Jean, there are many mutants walking the earth right now, many more born every day, but not all of them are good. There are some that are obviously going to be evil, and when that happens, we don't know what powers they're going to have. But if we have a force of people with powers, we might be able to combat them, because you never know what type of powers someone's going to have and how that goes to their head.
We are introduced to the mutant Magneto, and he feels that mutants are the superior race and should be ruling the planet, not the humans. Magneto has a plan, and the first phase of his plan involves the mightiest rocket of all the world and the mockery he will make of it. Magneto uses his mastery of magnetism powers to throw the rocket off course, plunging it back into the ocean surface, leaving the military men completely confused, as they thought every phase of the launch was perfect. The next morning, the papers are all over the military debacle. Next, at a firing range, a machine gun starts to move on its own, turning against the men, spraying bullets everywhere, as if they were being fired by a ghost. Tanks and satellites are next, and the general sounds the alarm. Condition red. Call the Pentagon. That's when they all see it. A message in the sky. Surrender the base or I'll take it by force. Magneto. The general and colonel are left speechless and do not know what to do. Proud of his work, Magneto has the military startled, but they do not seem to be making any moves for surrender. Maybe they need another demonstration. By focusing my powers through this energizer, this will get their attention. Magneto focuses his power on another missile, but this one is not in the air. It's still in its silo. The missile flies into the air and heads towards the unmanned target ship, destroying it instantly. But even this doesn't get the men to think to surrender. In fact, the general orders the men to find this Magneto at once. Some of the guys notice a commotion at the entrance to the facility. It seems Magneto has found them first. The guards try to stop the superpowered Magneto, but to no effect. Their weapons are useless. He is the master of magnetism after all. The guards try to lift their weapons to no avail. It's like they weigh a ton. Magneto easily walks through the guards, shifting polarities around himself, sending the guards flying or herding them together like cattle. Finally, Magneto is confronted by the general and his men. The general demands that the men take him out, but we already know this isn't going to work. And what looks like magic to them, Magneto uses his powers to corral the men and declares that he is taking control of this facility for Homo Superior. Cape Citadel is mine.
So we're introduced to Magneto for the first time, and he doesn't disappoint. He feels that mutants are the superior race and should not be ruled by humans. They should be the ones doing the ruling. He displays his powers by hijacking a rocket, the most wonderful, powerful rocket in the world. And from really far away, he uses his powers of magnetism, takes over the rocket, crashes it into the water, showing the military that they're not in control of anything here. The military men are all confused, and then there's a message in the sky. It says, "Surrender the base or I'll take it by force. Magneto." The military doesn't back down, though. They're not going to surrender. So Magneto displays another of his powers. He focuses his energy through this machine, and he opens up one of the other missile silos. See, the first one was in the air already. They had launched it, and the military didn't know how this had happened. And he opens up one of the silos, launches another one, and crashes it near a target ship that they use for training. And even this doesn't get the military to surrender. In fact, the general tells one of the guards, we're going to go out and find this Magneto right now. But just then, this other guard sees some commotion near the entrance of the facility. And Magneto approaches, and he just whips himself through there, changing polarities all around them. Guys try to stop him with guns. He makes them feel heavy as a ton. There's nothing that these guys can do. He's hurting them and throwing them all over the place. It's pretty awesome. And then he comes face to face with the general. General tells the guards to dispatch of him, but we already know that's not gonna work. And he uses his powers to corral them, and then he declares that Cape Citadel is his. So next we cut back to the X-Men, and Jean is trying on her X-suit, and the guys are spying on her, and she catches him, and a whole bunch of 60s hijinks ensues. I'm sure a lot of noises and bleeps and bloops were happening, and just then they're telepathically called by the professor. They all meet up in front of the professor. He thanks them for the punctuality. He's just so weird. And he tells them we have a huge problem. There's a situation at Cape Citadel. He believes it to be the work of an evil mutant, and the X-Men go on their first mission, and they need to defeat him. Everyone runs and gets ready. They're excited for their mission, and this is great, dude. They all get into the professor's decked out Rolls Royce, which takes them to the professor's remote controlled airplane. So they arrive at the Cape in full costume, and remember, nobody's ever heard of them before. Tanks are shooting at this magnetism field, and all this stuff is going on. The military's trying to get into the building that Magneto's in. They just can't. The general is super pissed, and then Cyclops interrupts him. And he's like, and this is exactly what is said. This is so funny. The general says, "To all intents and purposes, he's in full control, and we're on the outside looking in." So Cyclops taps him on the shoulder. "With due respect, General, I represent the X-Men. Maybe we can help." All the other guys look around, they're like, "The X-Men? What the hell is that?"
The general takes a look at the X-Men and said he's got his hands full with one costume cornball. So who or what are the X-Men? Cyclops just asked for 15 minutes for his team to work, and the general throws up his hands. He doesn't have any better ideas at the moment. Cyclops calls for the X-Men to attack. The team passes the men, who are all amazed at the looks of them. Iceman chills the air around him as he passes. Angel flies over them with his wonderful wings. Beast leapfrogs over the guards with ease, and Jean uses her telekinesis to move the men so she can get through. Cyclops reaches the magnetic barrier. The professor is still giving them instructions telepathically. He asks Cyclops to strengthen his optic blast to get through the barrier. Cyclops goes up to full blast, and inside, Magneto can feel his force field weakening, and finally it breaks, sending Magneto to the ground. He was unprepared for such an attack. The X-Men go storming in, but they need to be careful. They've never faced anything like this before. Magneto sees them and activates the base's hunter missiles. They'll hunt down each of the 5 X-Men using their unique heat signatures to hone in on. The missiles gain on Angel as he tries to outmaneuver them. Iceman prepares 5 ice grenades, and he throws them. He hits 4 of them, but there is still 1 missile left. Angel flies near Beast at his request, and Beast grabs the missile with his feet, stopping it in his tracks. Jean uses her telekinesis to direct the missile into the ocean where it detonates, harming none of the team, but probably a lot of fish. Now on to Magneto. Angel is the first to find him, and he flies in, but Magneto uses scraps of metal to ground the flying hero. Cyclops uses his beams to get the debris off of Angel, but Magneto is nowhere to be found. He spots the young X-Men and hurls an ignited tanker full of jet fuel at them. Thinking fast, Iceman uses all of his power to make a gigantic ice shield. Will this be enough to save them? The explosion is fierce, and Magneto thinks he has dispatched the X-Men. The heat is so intense, he has to walk around it and on top of the rubble. As he's walking, a giant energy beam comes up through the concrete, startling the Master of Magnetism. The X-Men jump out of the debris and continue their attack. Magneto creates another barrier, but it won't contain the team for long, and it doesn't. But when they break through it, Magneto is gone. Where could he have gone? A mutant with the power he has could be anywhere, but at least they've beaten him for now. The team goes back to the General, informing him that the base is back in their control. The General is astonished. Your 15 minutes isn't even up. I won't ask you to reveal your true identities, but know this: before the end of the day, the name X-Men will be known the world over. They shake hands, and the X-Men return to Xavier's school on the jet, with the professor congratulating them on a job well done.
The General takes a look at the X-Men. He starts, I think he's at his wit's end. He already has his hands full with one costumed weirdo, and he just throws up his hands and he says, I've got no better ideas. Whatever, you got 15 minutes.
Highly irregular, but all right.
So the X-Men go in and they foil Magneto's plans. They work together as a team, and they individually do a lot of things that were trained by the professor for them to do. Cyclops breaks through Magneto's barrier. Angel tracks down Magneto. Magneto does this thing where he uses the base's homing missiles, where they hone in on each individual heat signature of the X-Men. That was very convenient. And Iceman uses ice grenades and throws them at the missiles. He only gets 4 of them, though. And Beast tells Angel to fly over his way because the missile is chasing him. And he uses his foot to grab the missile, right? The missile is grabbed by his foot, and he chucks it over to Jean, and she uses her telekinesis to detonate it in the water, killing nobody except tons of marine life. So they can't find Magneto, and Magneto's over by this big canister of jet fuel. He ignites it and shoves it at the X-Men, and Iceman makes a big ice wall, and it explodes. Magneto thinks he's got the X-Men. The heat from this jet fuel is so much that he can't even get near it. He's got to walk around it. So he's walking on top of the rubble when all of a sudden an optic beam comes out of there. And he's like, what does this mean? And the X-Men are still alive to kick his ass. He forms another magnetism barrier around him. That's not going to keep them out for long. It doesn't, but by the time they get through it, Magneto is gone. Where did he go? We don't know. The X-Men win the day. They get the base back to the military. They fly off on the remote-controlled Xavier plane. And that's how the comic ends. So how did it hold up? That's the major question. Now, this is what I'm going to say. You either love Jack Kirby's art or you don't. Some of his earlier art was a little bit off. Now, I will say this. I love the way that he draws human faces. Even though it looks a little bit odd, it looks weird, he captures the essence of the time correctly. And this is iconic art. I mean, this is the start. I mean, you got to think about it. All the things that were in this comic, Xavier, Cyclops, Beast, Angel, Iceman, and Jean Grey, who they end up calling Marvel Girl in the comic itself. A lot of those things are staples of Marvel comics to come. And now I know the X-Men wasn't, if my research is correct, it didn't do as well as they wanted it to, and it ended up getting republicated or whatever. And then Chris Claremont came in with Giant Size X-Men #1 and revitalized the whole thing, and then it took off. But still, this is the foundation of it all. And with the story and the writing, I will say this. The dialogue is just hokey, guys. It's some of the hokiest stuff you'll ever read. But the story is actually okay. the story is actually okay. I mean, think about it. They have to establish Xavier, his school, the X-Men themselves, what they're about, what they're doing, their training, all of that stuff. They have to have the villain, and they got Magneto as the first villain in the first comic, one of the biggest villains in all of comic books, and they had them square off against each other. I mean, that's a lot to do in a 23-page comic. And that might be why some of those early comics are so word heavy. And the dialogue, though, is very hokey, guys. It's a sign of the times. It's what it was. It was 1963. But I enjoyed this, man. And this is going to be a lot of fun. So I do want to say, from here on out, these are not going to be reviewed like this. I wanted to do the first one to kick off this X-Men project. Now, if you've seen Bat Bits on my channel, where the comics are broken down into just pages, there's not me, and they're about 6 to 8 minutes long, possibly even shorter. Some are like 3 minutes. That's what a lot of these are going to be going forward. We're going to be starting from X-Men #1, and we are going to shoot off, man. I bought a ton of these digitally, and I have the a few of the damn it, I never remember what they're called. The Epic Collections or whatever they're called. I have a bunch of the Uncanny X-Men ones that I bought. So we're going to go through as many as we possibly can. It's going to be a lot of fun, guys. And I really appreciate you sticking around for the show. Next on the Lapsed Comic Fan, I am not sure what we're going to do, but the next show is going to be a live show. And it's going to be a short one. It's just going to be an unboxing and an unpacking. I bought about 9 omnibuses that I would like to show off, and I bought about 6 or 7 figures, and 2 of them complete a couple of sets from our Build-A-Character. So if you've been here for a while and you know about all the characters I bought in the Build-A-Character sets that I wanted to finish, one of them is going to get finished, and one of the other things that I bought the whole set, so we get 4 characters from that and an extra Build-A-Character that will be completed. So that will be live on the channel, and I would love to say thank you very much, guys, for being here. Peace out.
Highly irregular, but all right.